Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're going to be taking a journey through the life and beliefs of Karl Marx.
Oh, yeah.
You know, a figure that we typically associate with economics and politics.
Yeah, definitely.
But get this.
Okay.
Our sources suggest there's a surprising and rather unsettling side to the man who wrote Das Kapital.
Interesting.
We're about to explore the possibility of Marx having connections to...
Okay.
Wait for it.
I'm waiting. Satanism.
Intriguing, isn't it?
Yeah.
You see, while we often analyze Marx in a socio-political context,
Right.
we can't ignore the role his personal beliefs played in shaping his ideology.
Yeah.
Today we'll be drawing from Marx and Satan by Richard Wurmbrand.
Okay.
A fascinating read, considering the author's experiences as a prisoner in communist Europe.
Okay, so we've got Wurmbrand's perspective, which is sure to be unique given his background.
Yeah.
What else are we looking at today?
We'll also be diving into some of Marx's own writings.
Okay.
Poems, plays, even personal letters.
Wow.
To get a glimpse into his thoughts and emotions.
And, of course, we'll be pulling in some biographical accounts to help us piece together the puzzle of Karl Marx.
Sounds like we got a lot to unpack.
Yeah.
Where should we even begin with this?
Well, let's start with a stark contrast between Marx's early life and the revolutionary figure he later became.
Okay.
He grew up in a devout Christian family.
Oh, wow.
Even penned some rather spiritual poetry in his youth.
Really?
But somewhere along the way, there seems to have been a dramatic shift in his worldview.
Right, but is it really so surprising that someone's views might evolve over time?
Sure.
People change, beliefs change, right?
Of course. But the intensity of Marx's rejection of religion,
Yeah.
his apparent desire to avenge himself against the one who rules above, as he wrote in one of his poems, suggests something more profound than just a simple change of heart.
Okay, I see what you mean.
Yeah.
It's not just that he lost his faith,
Right.
it's the fervor with which he turned against it.
Exactly.
So what might have triggered this radical transformation?
That's the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
Interestingly, Marx's early life was actually quite comfortable.
Really?
He didn't experience the sort of hardships that might typically fuel anti-religious sentiment.
Yes.
However, if we examine his early writings, particularly his play Ulanem,
Okay.
we begin to see some disturbing themes emerge.
Ulanem.
Yeah.
This is where things get a bit more complex.
Right.
He creates this character, Ulanem,
Yeah.
who's obsessed with destruction, dragging humanity into some kind of abyss.
Right.
It's tempting to see this as a reflection of Marx's own inner turmoil.
It's a compelling interpretation, especially when you consider some of Marx's other writings,
Okay.
where he expresses a hatred for all that exists and a desire to undermine the foundations of the existing political system.
Hold on, are we saying that a playwright's characters are always direct reflections of their own beliefs?
Well,
Isn't it possible this was more of an exploration of different ideas, different philosophies, rather than a literal blueprint for his own worldview?
you raise a valid point. It's crucial to avoid simplistic interpretations of artistic expression.
Right.
But here's where things get interesting.
Okay.
These themes of rebellion, destruction, and even this concept of the abyss,
Right.
they align with certain aspects of satanic belief systems.
Okay, now I'm really curious.
Yeah.
We're talking about Karl Marx, the father of communism, potentially being influenced by Satanism.
Potentially, yeah.
Where is this connection coming from?
Well, Wurmbrand suggests that Marx might have even been involved with the Satanist church,
Really?
possibly participating in their rituals.
Wow.
Now, this is where we need to tread carefully
Okay.
and acknowledge that this is one interpretation of the evidence.
Rituals, that's a pretty bold claim.
It is.
What evidence did Wurmbrand present to support this?
He points to the dark and violent imagery in some of Marx's poetry and plays
Okay.
as further evidence of a potential connection.
Okay.
For example, in his poem The Player, Marx writes about eternal grief and an immeasurable death. And in Ulanem, there's a scene where the character speaks of descending into darkness with humanity,
Okay.
laughing as he follows them.
I'll admit those are pretty intense images. But couldn't they simply be artistic expressions meant to provoke or shock,
Sure.
rather than literal endorsements of satanic beliefs?
It's possible.
After all, artists often explore dark and controversial themes
Right?
without necessarily subscribing to them.
That's absolutely true.
Yeah.
We need to be cautious about reading too much into artistic expression,
Right.
but keep in mind that unlike atheists who don't believe in God at all,
Okay.
Satanists do believe in God.
Right.
They just see him as an enemy to be overthrown.
Okay.
And this theme of rebellion against a higher power resonates throughout Marx's work.
That's an interesting distinction.
Yeah.
It's not just about the absence of belief.
Right.
It's about active opposition.
Yes.
And speaking of opposition, some of the people Marx associated with held some pretty radical views themselves, right?
They did?
I'm thinking of figures like Moses Hess and Mikhail Bakunin.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Hess, who was a significant influence on Marx's early socialist thinking, described himself as a revolutionary. And saw Marx as the one who would give the last kick to medieval religion and politics.
Wow.
And Bakunin, another close associate of Marx, openly praised Lucifer and talked about the need to awaken the devil in the people.
Oh, wow.
To ignite revolution.
Wow. Awaken the devil in the people.
Yeah.
Those are some pretty strong words.
They are.
But were they just using provocative language?
Well,
or were they actually advocating for some kind of demonic uprising?
It's certainly open to interpretation,
Right.
but those statements definitely raise some eyebrows,
Yeah.
especially when you consider the potential influence these figures had on shaping Marx's worldview.
For sure.
Yeah.
So we're seeing these potential connections between Marx, these radical thinkers, and
Right.
ideas that align with Satanism.
Yeah.
But how did these ideas actually manifest in the real world? Did communist regimes exhibit any behaviors that could be interpreted through this lens?
That's a fascinating question, and Wurmbrand certainly believes so.
Okay.
He cites numerous instances of what he calls blasphemous acts carried out by communist regimes.
Okay.
Things like desecrating religious symbols,
Oh,
forcing priests to perform rituals with excrement, even torturing believers to make them blaspheme.
those are horrific acts, no question.
Yeah.
Are we attributing them to satanic influence a bit prematurely?
Well,
Couldn't these actions also be explained as attempts to suppress religious opposition?
sure.
Or even a twisted form of psychological warfare?
It's true that political regimes often resort to brutal tactics to eliminate opposition.
Right.
But Wurmbrand argues that these actions go beyond mere political repression.
Okay.
He sees them as deliberate attempts to defile and mock that which is considered sacred,
Okay.
a key element of what he understands as satanic ideology.
Could you give us an example of what he sees as evidence for that?
Wurmbrand highlights a particularly chilling example, a blasphemous version of the Lord's Prayer that was published in a Soviet newspaper, twisting the words of Jesus into a tool of hate and mockery.
I can see why he would find that disturbing to take something so central to Christian faith
Right.
and deliberately distort it like that.
Yeah.
It's a powerful form of psychological manipulation.
Exactly. And while such overt expressions of what Wurmbrand identifies as Satanism weren't always the norm in communist regimes,
Right.
there's evidence suggesting a deep fascination with the occult and esoteric knowledge, particularly within the Soviet Union.
Wait, the Soviets were dabbling in the occult? That sounds more like a spy thriller than historical fact.
It does a little bit.
What kind of evidence are we talking about here?
There's research suggesting they were actively exploring psychic phenomena, perhaps even trying to harness these forces for their own purposes. It's a bit of a rabbit hole. But it adds another layer to this whole conversation about potential connections between ideology power and the pursuit of control over both the physical and the spiritual realms.
Okay, it's definitely a lot to process.
It is.
So we've got these potential links between Marx's personal beliefs, the actions of communist regimes, and this whole concept of Satanism as interpreted by Wurmbrand.
Right.
But I have to ask, aren't we running the risk of oversimplifying a complex historical narrative?
Sure.
It seems like there's a lot of room for nuance here.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
We need to be cautious about drawing overly simplistic conclusions or attributing everything to a single cause.
Right.
History is messy, and human motivations are even more so.
Yeah, for sure.
But even if we set aside the religious interpretations for a moment,
Okay.
there's still a valuable lesson to be learned from this exploration.
And what lesson would that be?
That ideas, even those with noble intentions, can have unintended and often dangerous consequences, especially when those ideas are combined with unchecked power.
Okay, that's a point I think everyone can agree on.
Yeah.
Power corrupts. And absolute power corrupts absolutely, as the saying goes.
Right.
But how do we reconcile that with the fact that many people genuinely believed in Marxist ideas,
Right.
saw them as a path to a more just and equitable society?
That's the paradox, isn't it?
Yeah.
We can acknowledge the good intentions, the genuine desire to improve the human condition,
Right.
while also recognizing that even the most well-meaning ideologies can be twisted and manipulated to serve less noble ends.
So are we saying that all attempts to create a more equitable society are doomed to fail?
I wouldn't go that far.
Okay. That any ideology that challenges existing power structures is inherently dangerous.
Not necessarily, but I think it's crucial to remember that no ideology is immune to corruption.
Okay.
We need to approach all belief systems,
Okay.
whether political, religious, or economic,
Right.
with a critical eye, questioning assumptions and being mindful of the potential for abuse.
That's a good point. It's about recognizing the inherent complexity of human systems
Right.
and being wary of any ideology that claims to have all the answers
Yeah.
or promises a utopian future.
Exactly. There's no easy fix, no one-size-fits-all solution to the challenges facing humanity.
Right.
And any ideology that claims otherwise is probably worth a healthy dose of skepticism.
So where does this leave us in our exploration of Karl Marx?
Right.
We've uncovered some potentially disturbing connections between his personal beliefs, the actions of communist regimes, and this whole concept of Satanism as interpreted by Wurmbrand.
Right.
What's the takeaway for our listeners?
I think the key takeaway is that understanding history, even the less savory aspects of it, requires nuance and a willingness to grapple with uncomfortable truths.
And perhaps a reminder that the line between good and evil, between noble intentions and destructive outcomes, can be thinner than we'd like to believe.
Precisely, we need to be vigilant about the potential for darkness, even within ourselves and the ideologies we hold dear.
So as we move towards wrapping up this exploration of Karl Marx, is there anything else we should touch upon?
Yes, there's one more interesting aspect of Wurmbrand's argument that I think is worth considering.
Okay, I'm all ears. What is it?
He proposes that even if you don't subscribe to his religious beliefs, understanding the potential spiritual dimension of Marxism can offer a more nuanced perspective on its historical impact.
I'm intrigued. What does he mean by spiritual dimension?
He suggests that viewing Marxism through this lens helps explain the fervor, the almost religious devotion that many communists have displayed throughout history.
Okay.
It's not just about politics or economics for some. It's about a worldview that offers a sense of purpose, belonging, and even a path to a kind of salvation.
So it's almost like a substitute religion filling a void that might otherwise be filled by traditional faith.
That's one way to look at it. Yeah, it becomes almost like a secular faith with its own set of doctrines, rituals, and even martyrs.
But doesn't that kind of unwavering faith, whether in a traditional religion or a secular ideology, make people more susceptible to manipulation? I mean, if you believe wholeheartedly in something, you might be less likely to question its flaws or the potential for those in power to abuse it.
It's a valid concern. It's like anything else, too much of anything.
Yeah.
Even something that appears good on the surface
Right.
can have negative consequences. Blind faith without critical thinking and a willingness to question can be a dangerous thing.
So how does all of this connect back to Marx himself?
Well, Wurmbrand suggests that if we consider the potential spiritual dimension of Marxism, it might help us understand the immense impact his ideas have had on the world. Marx wasn't just an economist or political theorist. He tapped into something deeper, something that resonated with people on a fundamental level.
So even if someone doesn't agree with Marx's conclusions or the political systems that have been built upon his ideas,
Right.
we can still appreciate the power of his ideas and their ability to inspire such passionate belief, right?
Absolutely, and that's what makes this whole exploration so fascinating. We're not just talking about dry economic theories or political ideologies. We're delving into the realm of beliefs, motivations, and the very human need to find meaning and purpose in the world.
It makes you wonder, if Marx were alive today, would he be surprised by the ways in which his ideas have been interpreted and implemented? Would he condone the violence and oppression that have been carried out in the name of communism?
That's a question we can only speculate on, of course.
Right.
But it highlights the importance of recognizing the complexities of history and understanding that even the most well-intentioned ideas can be distorted and used for purposes far removed from their original intent.
This has been quite the journey. We've gone from exploring Marx's early life and writings to examining the potential connections between his ideas and the actions of communist regimes, all through the lens of Wurmbrand's interpretation of Satanism. I feel like we've only just scratched the surface of a very complex and multifaceted topic.
And that's the beauty of it. It's a topic that warrants further exploration, further research, and further dialogue. We've presented some thought-provoking ideas, some potential interpretations, and hopefully spark some curiosity in our listeners to delve deeper into this fascinating subject.
Before we wrap up, is there a final thought you'd like to leave our listeners with?
I think the most important takeaway, regardless of one's personal beliefs or political leanings, is to approach all ideologies, all systems of belief, with a healthy dose of critical thinking. question assumptions, challenge narratives, and be open to exploring alternative perspectives.
Great advice. A big thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the life and beliefs of Karl Marx. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep the conversation going.